I would like more land, he said. Then I said, I would love another antique home with beautiful gardens. And so our story began. Again. With a scratch of a pen to paper, Sugarwood, a small New England country estate, became ours. Won't you join me as I make Sugarwood our home and see how we enjoy a life of fine living, no matter how simple or grand that may be? And my hopes are to help you find your own version of fine living too. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. It would really help my channel out, and I'd really appreciate it. Well, hello, kindred spirits. Wait a minute. First, I have to make sure, is my microphone on? Yes, it is. Okay. Here we are, January 10th, 11th. Oh my gosh, this month is already flying by. But anyways, I wanted to hop on and tell you what's been going on already in 2022. A lot actually here at Sugarwood. But in 2022, here at the house, we have done quite a bit already, including research and work around the house. Now, one of the things, and I made my list here, is we had quite a bit of lighting added to the home. So behind me here, we finally put up the lanterns and had them electrified, just as I did at Groton House. At Groton House, there were old ones we had to rewire, put them in, and I loved these. And I did put in the selling disclosure that they would come with us to Sugarwood. And why did I want them so bad? One, I like the look, but two, they were $25 for the pair. I could never, or I shouldn't say never, I'd have a hard time replacing two lanterns that I really, really like for $25. So that's why they're here. And I just need to get new bulbs. I didn't have any of the flame shaped bulbs here at the house. So right now they have regular round ones. We also had ceiling lights put in the great room. So I have those in the ceiling. They're put on dimmers. The front part of the room is on one dimmer, and the back part, which would kind of line up when we get our sofa and when we do tables and a game table or whatever type in the back, that's on another dimmer. And we also added lights to the ceiling in the master bedroom because it was a very dark hole, just like the great room, with only two lights right now at the end of the bed. So we did put 5 lights in that room, and down the road I'll be putting more furniture, more lamps, but it's nice having that quick switch, lights on, and those are also on dimmers. And then it wasn't necessary, but this was a choice. We had the electricians go around the whole house and change every outlet and every switch. One, we wanted to make sure everything was done right. Two, the switches and outlets that were on here were very modern. They were, I believe they were Enlgland, and they were just very modern. Square, popped out, and it was just different shape. It didn't jive with the house for me. So we did have good old-fashioned switch plates and plugs put back in, and now we know that everything is wired correctly. They did find some pretty funky stuff behind the walls there, so we feel a lot better with that being done. Also, our kitchen remodel. I have been working diligently on quite a few concepts, and I'm not sure if it'll be this video, maybe the next, probably the next. I'm going to show you some of the ideas that I have, and we'll go over those together. I'll even do like a little walk around and point things out, because it's hard to look at a plan and know what's in my brain, because I don't even know what's in my brain. So it's scary in there. Let's see. Oh, house research. Right in front of me. This is just one of the many things that I was given when I went to our local historic society. And I found some pretty exciting things about Sugarwood. And a lot of it I knew. A lot of it confirmed what I thought I knew. And I found some information that's really, I think, not correct. So that's when I asked to volunteer in the archive room and help them organize things while I research Sugarwood. Now, how did I get to that point? When I was there, we're upstairs, we couldn't find much on the property. And keep in mind, the Historic Society moved to that building not too long ago. It was built for them and they were still in kind of a bit of disarray. And I kept saying, can I just look in your archive room? Can I just look at the files? And there was a little bit of not right now or not feeling comfortable with that. But once they realized how serious I was, once they realized that I really do have a passion for historic homes and our town, he finally said, all right, let's go down and look in the archive room. And I'm not kidding, within 4 minutes maybe, I found a nice thick file on Sugarwood that explains so much about the property, and I can't wait to share that with you. And then we'll start doing some research together on other things. And what else have I been doing? Oh, Meeting House. So here in here in Greenfield, New Hampshire, it's the town that we've moved to. Greenfield has the oldest meeting house in New Hampshire, the oldest one, and it is in need of repair, a lot of it. So I have jumped on board and I'm going to be helping with fundraising in some sort of capacity. It might be that I host a Halloween party there or something to help raise funds. I'm not sure yet, but this coming Friday, I'm going to the meeting house. I'm getting a personal one-on-one tour to see everything. I might even go up in the belfry where there is a Paul Revere bell, but I'm not sure if that's going to be accessible or not. But we're going to get a private tour, see what this building needs, and that's another thing I will be researching while I'm at the Historic Society. Ben pretty much thinks I'll be part of the Historic Society officially, more so than not, sooner than I think. But right now I'm just saying I'm going to volunteer here and there. Let's see. Oh, and last but not least, I've mentioned in the past that I've been working on a book proposal, and I'm just here putting it out there, putting it to the universe that it's getting closer to be done, and I'm a little excited. It took me a while to really hone in on the concept because I have so many different ideas, and I know I could write 2 or 3 other books, but I wanted to hone in on this first one that might excite readers like yourself, hopefully, to pick it up, grab it, look at it, read it, buy it, and then tell your friends about it. So that is something I've also been working on, and when I'm laid up from my shoulder surgery starting in a week and a half, or probably a week when you see this video, I'll be working a little bit more on the book proposal and research of Sugarwood. One thing on this list I wanted to share was the history of Sugarwood. And there is a lot that's going on that is really starting to fall in place. One being the story of Sugarwood. And I have the story here in a book, or a booklet I should say, that was given out during a Christmas house tour back in the, I think, 70s. And this tells a little story about it, and I thought I would read this. And while I'm reading it, I'm also going to let you know where I think there's some discrepancies. And then I will also share some information about what I found in the eaves that made me believe that this house had dormers. And then when I went to the Historic Society, I got my confirmation that there were in fact dormers on this house and taken off. So let me read the story, and I hope that this moves along smoothly. Many of you know I am dyslexic, and reading to me is not something that I enjoy doing publicly. So here we go. A history of Sugarwood. The town of Greenfield first settled around 1770 and was incorporated in 1791. It was formed from a small portion of Peterborough, a large chunk of Limeborough. Almost the entire eastern half of Greenfield was once the western portion of Limeborough, and lands that were known then as Society Land and Limeborough Slip. In 1790, John Burnham purchased 75 acres of land in western Limeboro and proceeded to wrest a farm from the forest. Now, this is one of the things that I'm not quite sure of, because when I started doing my research, which I'm getting pretty darn good with ancestry and whose children were who and uncles of who and this and that, I did a lot of deep diving into actual files, actual birth certificates, actual town census. And there was no John Burnham that I could find that then gave it to a son, John Burnham, which we'll read about later. So that was one of the discrepancies. And I did find another Burnham that I feel is the original owner. Another thing I learned is I have never heard of the word rest, W-R-E-S-T. So that is one, and then there's another one about the barn, but rest, my new word, and I'm going to put that right here of what it is. All right, so in 1790, John Burnham purchased 75 acres of land in western Limeboro and proceeded to wrest a farm from the forest. In 1791, his farm became part of the new town called Greenfield. Very little is known of John Burnham. There were many Burnham families in the area, and one, Amy Burnham, I don't know if it's Amy or Amy, I'm going to say Amy Burnham, was a neighbor of John. I believe Amy was the owner of this house, and I'll explain what later. Both men were about the same age, and both came to the area about the same time. Amy was from Ipswich, Massachusetts. John Burnham's previous home is not known, and his relationship to Amy is not known. Now, once again, this was all before the internet and before I got to the information. On a side note, I found out that John Jr. and his wife Sally, also a Burnham by birth, had the same grandfather. His name was Amy, and it was Amy Sr., who I believe bought the land, since other records state Sally's father owned the home before her and John moved in. I also found records that Amy sat on the town council, and no John Sr. was found in town at that point. There's any connection here. But later in some information I found, it said that John Burnham Jr.'s wife, Sally, her family owned this house. Through my research, I found out that Sally was also a Burnham, first cousins getting married, and that her father was Amy. And that's why I believe Amy was the owner, and I have not found any information that a John Burnham purchased land in this section, but I still have to go to Limeboro records. I will say that. All right, so John Burnham built the house, and it's saying around 1800. Now we have 1790, so that's probably when the land was purchased and they started to cut the trees. A smaller frame building located some distance on the east, and probably John Burnham's first residence, was moved and attached to the house at the time. A barn would later be added. John Burnham had at least one son, John Burnham Jr., who we do know lived in this house. He was born in 1787. Whether John Jr. had any brothers or sisters is not known. According to the 1820 population census, the occupants of the Burnham farm in that year were John Jr., his wife Sally, and their 4 children. John Sr. and his wife lived elsewhere, though they apparently still had title to the farm. I haven't found that information yet, but it could be there. In 1829, ownership of the farm passed to John Sr. Ownership of the farm passed to John Jr. For the next 40 years, John and Sally operated the family farm. It was an average-sized farm with 6 or 7 milk cows and 10 sheep. Some grain was raised, chiefly corn, oats, and barley. In 1869, with both John and Sally in their 80s and living alone at the farm, the property sold to George Woodbridge for $1,500. George Woodbridge came from Francistown. He was 49 years old. His wife Eliza was 47, and their one child, George, was 8 years old. George's father, Osgood, was also a member of the household. George Woodbridge's farming activities were very modest, even by 19th century standards. In 1890, he only had 3 milk cows, a horse, and 2 pigs. He did have a sizable potato and corn crop, 110 and 50 bushels respectively. The milk from his 3 cows produced 475 pounds of butter, and sugar orchard in the back of the house yielded enough maple syrup sap to produce 50 pounds of maple sugar. Some of this produce was consumed by his family, but most of it was sold. Total value of the produce for the year was $645. That sum, a modest sum, could support a family for a year, would not be unusual for 1870. The farm would furnish much of the family's food, and his taxes were only $26.43. That included a $2 tax on his female dog. Of course, this was the 19th century, and there were no expensive items such as automobiles or television, nor were there large electric phone and fuel oil bills. George Woodbridge was, however, paying off a $500 mortgage. His only help on the farm was from his 8-year-old son and his 78-year-old father. Even a small farm such as this would keep him very busy. George Woodbridge sold the farm to Theodore Wood in 1872 and moved to Bennington, New Hampshire. Maybe Bennington, Vermont. You know what? It doesn't say here. Theodore paid $1,600 for the property, kept it for only a few months, and then sold it to George and Susan Wood for $1,950. The railroad came to Greenfield in 1874, giving local dairy farmers access to Nashua and Boston milk markets. Dairy farming became very profitable. George and Susan took advantage of this and increased the size of their herd, having at times as many as 10 milking cows. But the prosperity was short-lived as the railroad continued its expansion, reaching into the agriculturally rich areas of northwestern Vermont and southern Canada. Farmers in these regions flooded the market with milking, driving the price below the cost of producing milk on Greenfield's rocky soils. This forced the retirement of many local farms. George and Susan Wood continued farming, but reduced their herd to 1 to 2 milking cows just to meet the family's needs. Susan Wood died in 1890, and her husband died 15 years later. The farm then passed to their 6 children: Mary, Susan, George, John, Walter, and Charles. Walters purchased his siblings' share of the farm for $133 each. The value of the farm had fallen from $1,900 to $800 in 1872. Walter Wood already owned the adjoining farm, now owned by Spud Fleck and known as the Grimes Farm. Walter had purchased this property from his younger brother George, who had unsuccessfully tried to earn a living operating the farm. Walter had no intention of being a farmer. He purchased the Grimes Farm as a home for his retirement and then probably purchased his father's farm for sentimental reasons. In his retirement, Walter lived at the Grimes Farm. For all practical purposes, his father's farm was abandoned and the buildings were left to slowly rot away. The house survived due to its sale to Don and Irene Davis in 1930 for $700. Many old Greenfield farmhouses exist today only because city residents purchased them for summer homes. Remember, I found the wallpaper in the attic, Concord House and Greenfield House. I believe that is the case here. Don and Irene repaired the damage from years of neglect and added running water and modern plumbing. They also raised a barn. Now, there's that other word, raised, R-A-Z-E-D, which I guess means taking down a barn, versus R-A-I-S-E-D, putting up. So that word confused me. The farm was sold to Elliot and Hazel Hutchinson in 1946, and then to Endicott Rantoul in 1951. Then John and Katrina Jenkins purchased the property in 1967. All right, so here's where we get to some of the fun part, and then I have more when it comes to the architecture of the house. John and Katrina Jenkins did a major restoration of the old Burnham home in 1967 and 1968. At the time, it was noted that many of the studs of the original cape were numbered in sequence so that the side of the house could be built on the ground, then raised, R-A-I-S-E-D, by the workmen to the proper vertical position. The house had been insulated by employing small, tiny ears of corn. The original cape, as it now stands with its original old timbers, plaster, wainscoting, and flooring. The chimney had been replaced as the original bricks were crumbling. There has been some change to the exterior, though the house is pretty much as it was when it was built. The original wings, this is the part I found interesting, the original wings and shed had been torn down, but in 1967 and 1968, restoration replaced the two wings, but on a smaller scale. Now, I don't know if they mean the wings off of our kitchen and our bedroom wing, which the bedroom wing is certainly 60s, 70s, or do they mean the kitchen wing and our great room? And there is information that makes me believe the great room was put on in the 50s and 60s. The interior has been modernized, and the house is now an excellent example of how the charm of an old historic New Hampshire home can coexist with today's modern conveniences. So, like I said, this is just part of the information I found, and some of that is pretty much with what I found in the old records. But then, once again, since they didn't have the internet, some of the information is askew a little bit. Now, I have a list of some of the changes, like the porch, our sun porch. I know I wanted to change it, but I needed to make sure what era it was. I was very excited to find out that that whole porch was put on, not just changed, but put on in 1971. So you know what this girl's going to be doing. She's going to be remodeling that home. And I should say redecorating, because I'm not going to be tearing down walls or anything, but that porch is getting nephelized for sure. The kitchen, I now feel better knowing that that was taken down to the ground and rebuilt in the 60s, late 60s, and they probably used some of the old beams, because some of those beams are going to be covered during the kitchen remodel. And I'm even going to try to do it so that when you open a cabinet door, well, I guess you wouldn't be able to see that because the cabinets are encased, but that's beside the point. So I'm hoping not to cover all the beams, but if they do get covered, so be it. They weren't what the house was at one point. So at this point, I know I'm rambling. Now let me tell you a little bit about the dormers on the house and why I first thought there were dormers, but I couldn't believe that they were taken off. But once I crawled in, I do have this little boxed area. Now, that doesn't say to me that there has to be dormers, but let me show you something that when I look at things, I'm going to put my flashlight here. When I look at things, I look at other details. One being the floor. So where I am right now kneeling, the floor is rough wood, but then it goes to smooth and looks like, polyurethane or whatnot. And looks like a piece of, I don't know what that is, membrane, but it goes right to the other side. So if you can envision, if this little sidewall was not here, which goes into my stepdaughter's bedroom, this right here would have been a walkway to a window that you could look out. So I'm gonna see if I can pull this and see what this is. Yeah, so this is actually just like a roofing material, but once again, it's on where you could see it was part of a room. And right here, you can also see where there was a wall put in. Am I tempted to take off one of these? Absolutely. I probably will, actually. But the reason I'm doing this right now is I'm just looking to see what else is down here. I have so many lamps and so many items that I need to store, and I'm going to put them in here for now because this is one of the larger, cleaner spaces. That black box there is for mice, because yes, here in the country there's a lot of mice, so we're taking care of that situation. But this, once again, is why I firmly believe, without a doubt, there was a dormer here. So when I was once again in the Historic Society, one of the records I found was that they did in fact take dormers off in 1942, I believe it was. It's not in front of me right now. They took the dormers off in 1942 and then put on a large dormer off the back, which is now currently still there. Another thing I found interesting is that they also took off a square porch that was on the front of the house. Now, if you look at some old videos or photos of the front of our house, there is a square patio that I thought was kind of out of place. I now know, firmly believe, that that is the square where the enclosed porch was. I mean, they have a beautiful view of the mountains. Why not put a porch there and have a patio and sit? But they did take that off. So now I have this beautiful square patio that's a little out of place. I also believe that where the boxwoods are forming around the patio was most likely where a lot of the construction was. When we remove those boxwoods, I'm going to be able to get a little more insight to what really went on here at the front of our house. But that's a whole different summer project. All right, I think I've rambled on enough at this point.